Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be diving back into my absolute favorite Wildstorm superhero team, and honestly, my favorite superhero team of the early Image days, with Stormwatch number 6. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in December of 1993, here on the cover we get a really good look at the entirety of the Stormwatch 1 team, along with a background that will make a lot more sense once we get into the story of this issue. But most notably, we get our first good look at Battalion's brand new costume, and strangely enough, at no point within the pages of this issue is it ever acknowledged that he's wearing a completely different costume than we've ever seen him wear before. Now, obviously, superhero costumes change quite frequently throughout all of comic book history, so that's nothing new. But it is a little bit odd that they wouldn't at least bring it up, especially given the fact that it's already been established in the Stormwatch story, most notably Stormwatch number 0, that the costumes given to all of the heroes on the team are specifically designed to enhance their superpower abilities. And it would have been really easy to acknowledge this and make it make sense within that context of like someone stating, hey, Battalion, how's that new costume working out for you? To feel like it's making your powers work better? Or, maybe Weatherman contacts Battalion from the Skywatch satellite and asks him, if everything seems to be functioning normally, that they were getting some weird readings. It's so easy to get that in with just a couple of sentences that it seems really weird that they wouldn't do it, especially when the costume itself is so noticeably different, given the large backpack that's been added and the completely different color scheme. I really find it super odd that they would just throw this right on us and just act like everything was exactly the way it had always been. Jim Lee, Brandon Choi, co-creators. Brandon Choi, Jim Lee, plot. Brandon Choi, script. Scott Clark, pencils. Trevor Scott, inks. Wendy Fouts, Joe Chiodo, colors. Ben Fernandez, Joe Dunn, color separators. Chris Eliopoulos, letters. Deborah Marvin, Bill Kaplan, editors. The story begins with Battalion and the rest of the Stormwatch 1 team stationed on one of the UN's brand new stealth naval ships. And they are tasked with aiding in a blockade of the small island nation of Gamorra, as the UN has decided to enact sanctions on the island nation to stop their black market arms dealing and human rights violations. Now, some of you may seem to find this design of stealth ship rather familiar, and that is because this is almost certainly based on the Sea Shadow, which was a prototype stealth ship designed in conjunction with the US Navy and Lockheed, and it had just been unveiled this exact year, 1993, and most likely would have been, all the buzz with writers and creators. Obviously, we see it featured here in this comic book. It was also featured throughout quite a few different video games, as well as a facsimile of that ship featured in the James Bond film Tomorrow Never Dies, starring Pierce Brosnan, and I believe Denise Richards was the Bond girl in that film, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been forever. I watched that movie once in 1997 when it was in theaters, and I have never watched it again. It was not the best Bond film. The villain in particular was terrible in that movie. His whole premise for wanting to start World War III was literally just so that he could control the media around it. It was really weird. That was an odd film. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but if you've watched it recently, let me know what you thought about it, because I always thought it was one of the weakest Bond films in the entire series. The crew of the ship continues to scan the waters looking for any activity, and Diva wonders if their blockade is even working. However, Battalion brings up the fact that they've already confiscated a fortune in black market arms, and at this point, the Gamorran economy must certainly be suffering. However, Winter warns him that if Kaizen Gamorra feels that he's trapped and his back is against the wall, that they should be expecting the unexpected, and Battalion agrees. Suddenly, an alarm sounds, and one of the crew of the ship explains that there is a small hydrofoil craft that is speeding along the water towards international seas. Battalion says that he and the Stormwatch 1 team will take care of it, as we then see the craft itself speeding along the surface of the ocean. The crew inside are doing their best to try and make it past the blockade with their shipment, and they believe that they can do so as this ship is traveling at an incredible rate of speed. However, one of the crew of the small craft notices that there is something showing up on their radar, and the captain believes that it's probably just some helicopter or something and they can outrun it. However, we then see the glass of the craft shatter behind him and realize this is because Diva has used her sonic abilities to shatter all of the glass on the ship. Diva, whose real name is Alessandra Fermi, I believe is how you say that, is the Italian-born member of the Stormwatch team. She is said here to have come from a long line of opera singers and was going to continue on that path until these powers manifested and changed her destiny forever. And in fact, her sonic abilities are so powerful that the glass she shattered was in fact bulletproof. With the crew of the vessel distracted, Hellstrike uses his fire abilities to destroy the communications and satellite link-up of the ship. However, the ship continues to try and make its way back into Gamoran waters and safety. However, the Stormwatch team acts fast as they realize if this happens, all of this will have been for naught and they won't be able to question the crew of the vessel. Battalion repels from the helicopter above and realizes that he's not going to make it in time to disable the ship. Fuji chimes in and tells Battalion that he has an idea, and Battalion tells him to go for it as they can't allow this ship to escape. Also, we get this really great full-page splash of Battalion rappelling out of the helicopter. This looks fantastic. I really like this one. Fuji then decides to go for broke as he launches himself from the helicopter with no parachute whatsoever directly into the vessel, and as he crashes into it, he takes out all of the engines. Now, this is made possible because Fuji's actual form is that of pure energy, and the physical form that we see before us here is nothing more than a containment suit that holds all of that energy within it. This containment suit is nearly indestructible and gives him nigh invulnerability. Now, in terms of his super strength, it's not fully explained whether or not that's the containment suit or perhaps his energy powers, or maybe a mix of both. Right now, we don't know. What we do know, though, is that Fuji is insanely powerful and insanely strong, and he uses both of these things to basically make his body a living, walking, tank-like weapon. After the Stormwatch team boards the ship, Battalion uses his psionic abilities to hold all of the crew and start to question them. The captain protests, stating that they've done nothing wrong, but Battalion drops the restraints and gets in the captain's face, stating, well, if that's the case, maybe you won't mind if I start bursting open these crates to look at what your contraband may or may not be. At this moment, Battalion uses his powers to break open one of the crates, revealing a Gamoran warborg, which is, of course, some sort of robotic soldier that they were probably going to sell to the highest bidder. And the captain tries to pretend like he didn't realize that was in there, but Battalion's not buying it and lets him know. So at this point, the captain realizes that the jig is up and that he better start trying to negotiate in some way, and offers Battalion up some valuable information, as he puts it, and Battalion decides to play ball, stating that he's listening. Battalion grabs the captain and throws him up against the wall as a means of intimidating him, and the captain responds by telling him that the Gamorans have 3 members of Stormwatch imprisoned on the island. Battalion doesn't buy it, as he states, we're the first Stormwatch team here, and I know for a fact none of us have been captured. However, the captain rebuts by saying, no, not you, Stormwatch Prime. Deathtrap brought them to the island. I've seen them with my own eyes. This stuns Battalion, as he states, that's impossible. Flashpoint, Nautica, and Sunburst, they can't be alive. I know for a fact because I watched them die. However, the captain once again tries to argue, stating, "No, I promise, they're there. They've been held on Gamora for quite some time." At this point, however, Battalion becomes enraged and throws the captain across the room. He then uses his powers to start probing the captain's mind and realizes that the captain is in fact telling the truth, and that the members of Stormwatch Prime have in fact been imprisoned on Gamora for many years at this point and have been tortured the whole time. However, this probe is causing all kinds of havoc for the captain, who will in fact die if he's not released from it immediately. Realizing this, Diva grabs Battalion and tells him to stop, and Battalion starts to scold Diva, telling her, "You don't realize, Diva, you weren't there in Kuwait. You didn't see what happened. It was the first time we ever encountered Deathtrap and the Mercs, and I was for sure convinced that the other members of Stormwatch were all killed, but now I know they're alive and what we have to do." However, at this point, he's cut off by Diva, who tells him what we have to do is report all of this information back to Weatherman and await further orders. We still have a mission to complete, and you're trying to do something all on your own. And of course, this doesn't sit well with Battalion, as he is very much on the kick of wanting to rescue his friends and comrades. We then get an advertisement for Stormwatch Yearbook. I'm about 90% sure that I have this, and I'm 100% sure that if I do, I'll be making an episode about it in the not too distant future. So keep an eye out for it, because there's a very, very good possibility that this is going to be happening not too far away from now. Getting back to the story, we see that Diva and Battalion are having an absolute shouting match, as Diva is doing her best to convince Battalion not to go through with trying to rescue the members of Stormwatch Prime. However, Battalion tells her that he is not about to abandon his friends again, and that no matter what, he's going through with this mission. Diva once again tries to reason with him, stating that she is the executive officer of this team and it's her job to carry out the mission to the letter. And Winter even does his best to try and reason with Battalion, stating that he agrees with Diva and that they can't just go off on some crazed mission with no backup, and that this could have some real dangerous implications if anything goes wrong. And he also worries that Hellstrike and Fuji don't know what they're getting themselves into. However, Battalion cuts him off and states that regardless of anything they say, he's going through with this. And as we see, Hellstrike is already on the chopper. Fuji is getting in behind, stating that while he understands the protest that Diva and Winter have, he agrees with Battalion in this matter and will be accompanying him. As we see the chopper fly off, Diva states that she wishes them the best of luck and hopes that nothing goes wrong. Winter then tells her that he's really feeling uneasy about all of this, as it seems just a little bit too coincidental that there would be so much commotion all in one night that would lead to some of the Stormwatch team going off half-cocked to complete a rescue mission for people that they're not even certain they're going to be able to find. As the chopper flies through the Gamoran countryside, they come across a research facility which is being swarmed by Gamoran forces. This is not due to the chopper itself, but because of a distress signal that is emanating from this Gamoran research facility, when suddenly the entire facility explodes. Realizing that this will obviously attract all sorts of unwanted attention, the team does their best to speed away. Fuji brings up that perhaps they should have used one of the stealth-capable vessels. However, Battalion reminds him that it would have taken far too long to prepare one of those, and he's not even that skilled at flying them. So he decided it would have been a better bet to have taken this helicopter gunship. Fuji agrees that this is probably the best plan, but also states that they need to get out of here fast. Now, interestingly enough, the Gamoran research facility that just exploded on the top of this mountain is in fact the exact same Gamoran research facility that we saw depicted in Wildcats number 5. And if you'd like to know more about that and why exactly this facility just exploded, You can find out all about it in my episode on Wildcats number 5, along with all of my other Wildcats episodes in my Wildcats playlist. We are then teleported to the office of one Kaizen Gamora, aka Chairman Gamora, the leader of the small island nation of Gamora. He is on a video conference call with none other than Deathtrap, as he tells Deathtrap that he expects to see results in the very near future, and that he has spent a lot of money on Deathtrap's services and is going to be very disappointed if he doesn't deliver on his promises. However, Deathtrap assures the chairman that all will come to fruition quite shortly, as we learn that all of this has been a carefully laid plan by Deathtrap. He's the one that allowed the captain to know of the captured Stormwatch Prime members, and then also sent him out with the Warborgs, knowing that he would be captured by the UN and that he would likely give up the information about Stormwatch Prime. Upon learning this, he knew the battalion wouldn't be able to resist trying to come to the aid of his friends on a rescue mission. Kaizen Gamora tells Deathtrap that he does see the logic in his plan, but that it had better work, and that he should contact him the moment that he has Stormwatch in his custody. Deathtrap guarantees the chairman that this will in fact work, and that he will have the Stormwatch team under his control very shortly to use as leverage in ending this UN blockade. We then come to the centerfold pinup by Travis Charest and Trevor Hansen, and honestly, I think this one's pretty good. This looks super cool. I love this pinup. We get Battalion up top looking awesome, along with the rest of the Stormwatch team featured in a panel underneath him. This would have looked awesome hanging on your wall, and they designed it specifically so that you could remove this pinup from the comic book without ruining all the rest of the pages that were necessary for the story. Good on them for doing that, but also good on whoever owned this book before me, because they didn't tear this pinup out of it, and that allows me to show it all to you. And again, I think it's fantastic, despite the fact that whatever the hell kind of crazy space gun that Battalion has here makes absolutely no sense. Like, seriously, why does it have wings on it? That doesn't make any sense at all. Why would it ever be designed to look like this? It doesn't matter. It looks cool. I'm fine with it, despite the fact that it's ridiculous. This is terrific, and I love seeing this kind of stuff in comics whenever it shows up. We then get an advertisement for issue number 3 of the original Union miniseries, featuring the artwork of Mark Texiera and the writing of Michael Heisler. Now, I am a massive fan of Union and cannot recommend it enough, and if you'd like to learn more about Union, you can check out my Union playlist, which features an episode on every single issue of the original Union miniseries. Getting back to the story, the chopper finally makes it to one of the Gamoran cities, and Hellstrike starts to wonder if Battalion knows where he's going. Battalion tries to reassure his comrade that he knows exactly what building he's looking for, as he extracted an image from the mind of the captain and knows absolutely what it looks like, but he needs to get his bearing in the city before he can find it. Unfortunately, before that can happen, an alarm sounds, and Hellstrike realizes that they've been detected by Gamoran security, and that 3 Gamoran Vipers have been scrambled to intercept them. Realizing that they are outnumbered and outgunned, Battalion decides to take evasive action immediately. As one of the Vipers approaches, he wastes no time in launching a missile and blowing it out of the sky. Unfortunately, the 2 remaining Vipers close in quickly and slow down as a means to try and match the speed of the chopper so that they can blow it out of the sky as well. Battalion then decides that the only way to lose the 2 Vipers is to dive into the city streets and maneuver through the buildings, stating that they'd be crazy to follow. However, the Vipers continue to pursue, and Fuji tells him, well, I guess they're going to be joining us in the asylum. At this point, Battalion tells everyone to buckle up, that he's going to reverse thrusters. This catches Fuji off guard as he states, wait a minute, buckle up? We then see as the chopper goes backwards in full reverse and the Vipers pass that Fuji was not ready for this at all, as his head smashes right through the front windshield of the chopper, which is kind of funny as he states, "I didn't even know these had seatbelts." As the first Viper moves far past the chopper, Battalion immediately locks on with a heat-seeking missile and blasts it out of the sky. Thankfully, the Viper lands in the bay and doesn't damage any civilian property. However, before he can make any more maneuvers, the third Viper, which didn't fall for this trick, unleashes its own barrage of missiles, going straight for the chopper, and Battalion realizes that they have to eject or they're going to be destroyed. Also, I'd like to point out that this windshield, which just had Fuji's head smashed straight through it, certainly looks as if there's nothing wrong with it, almost like they forgot that this just happened when they were drawing this panel. The three members of Stormwatch 1 escape just as the helicopter they were riding in is destroyed by the missiles from the Gamoran Viper. The Viper then speeds away, and Battalion assumes that they must have thought they were killed in the explosion. However, as the chopper goes down, Battalion states that Hellstrike needs to destroy it before it impacts any of these civilian structures. Unfortunately, it's too late, and the helicopter crashes directly into one of the office buildings downtown. This horrifies the team as they believe that this has just caused a number of civilian casualties. However, Battalion uses his powers to scan the building and is assured that no one was inside of it, as apparently it's late enough at night that everyone had gone home. However, the amount of debris that came from the top of the building and rained on the streets below is concerning. The team then lands on the streets and does their best to try and assist all of the people who were trapped underneath the rubble, making sure that everyone is okay. We even see Fuji picking up a large piece of concrete off of a destroyed car. He tells Battalion that the occupants inside are a little banged up, but they're not severely injured. Battalion then notices a familiar set of red and blue flashing lights approaching and tells the team that now that the police are on their way, they need to get out of here ASAP before they're discovered by the authorities. Battalion, Fuji, and Hellstrike then quickly duck into an alleyway to try and figure out what their next move should be. Unfortunately, they are immediately discovered by the police, who arrive in an armored vehicle with laser cannons and rocket launchers. Now, this might seem like gross overkill for any police force, but when you factor in the amount of civil unrest that we saw depicted in the pages of Cybernary, and couple in the fact that Kaizen Gamora himself is a megalomaniacal dictator, it pretty well tracks. Fuji is then tasked with trying to delay the police, so he immediately charges forward and punches the armored vehicle, knocking the roof clean off of it and terrifying the officer inside. We then see Hellstrike scout up ahead to try and do recon for the team when he is immediately hit from behind by a blast from an unknown assailant. Realizing that their friend is down, Battalion tells Fuji to come with him as they immediately rush to his aid, only to round the corner and discover that they have been ambushed by none other than the Mercs. Of course, led by Deathtrap, with the added bonus of Brutus, Razor, and Kilgore, aka Not Wolverine, as it seems as though Deathtrap's plan has worked perfectly. Back on the UN vessel, the captain is stunned by what he's observing from the bridge, as he states the city is becoming an inferno. Winter tells him that he's actually not surprised by this, as he knows for a fact that Battalion would burn down the gates of hell itself if that's what it took to rescue the members of Stormwatch Prime. Meanwhile, Diva continues to monitor Gamoran news reports, trying to keep abreast of the situation, while she starts to think to herself, stating that she always trusted Jackson King's judgment, but now she wonders if she ever really knew him at all. However, before this thought process can continue, she's interrupted by a transmission from Weatherman. She immediately answers the video conference call and tells Weatherman that she seems to have picked up all sorts of information about a crashed helicopter, and destruction in the city, along with downed Gamoran vessels. And Weatherman confirms that this is congruent with all of the observations they've made from the Skywatch satellite. He also tells Diva that one of the UN contacts from inside of Gamora has confirmed that the Mercs may very well be involved with this. Upon hearing this, Diva is gung-ho about trying to go in for an immediate extraction and save her teammates. However, Weatherman cuts her off and states that no such action will be taken, that the members of Stormwatch that are in fact Battalion, Hellstrike, and Fuji will be immediately disavowed by all of the rest of the Stormwatch and UN forces, and that from this point forward, they will not be condoning any of their actions, and that those 3 members of the team are 100% on their own as we reach the end of the story for this issue. We then, of course, get the obligatory Wizard magazine ad that we see so often in different issues of these early Image titles. And then we reach Mailstorm, the part of the book where readers could write in and potentially have their letters published and answered by the people working on individual books. Unfortunately, that isn't really what happens in this one for the most part. And that is due to the fact that this letter column actually isn't all that interesting. Most of the letters are really just kind of ball washing and talking about how great they think Stormwatch is. And while there are a few letters that have some interesting questions being asked, those questions are either kind of glazed over and not really answered in any detail, or just 100% ignored. So I don't even know why they bothered printing this up other than to just get out of drawing 3 more pages. And on the final page of the book, along with the reverse inside cover, we get a 2-page ad for quality comic apparel. And oh my God, you have no idea how bad I want all of this. The ability to get any of this in the year 2026 when I'm recording it would be something I would pay so much money for. The opportunity to buy a Union or Backlash t-shirt, a Cybernary hat. Are you kidding me? I would wear that like every day. I am so sad that I have missed out on the opportunity to purchase all of this apparel because I would absolutely wear it all the time. You have no idea. And that was Stormwatch number 6. And in all honesty, I really liked this issue. I have no complaints about the story of this issue, save for one very strange thing that I noticed. And that is that Stormwatch number 6 does not even acknowledge or bring up the events of issue number 5, which wouldn't necessarily be a problem were it not for the fact that in issue number 5, as those of you who have been following along may remember, Warguard was freed from their cryogenic prison chamber and then possessed by demonites, which means that this should be priority number 1 for Stormwatch and the UN to be dealing with, as we've been told through the pages of Stormwatch that Warguard are in fact a global level threat, and that they are absolute maniac supervillains hell-bent on world domination. So it seems really odd that not only is Stormwatch 1 not immediately trying to deal with that problem, they don't even mention that it's happened. They're instead aiding in a sanction blockade around the island of Gamora, which seems like Stormwatch 2 could have probably easily handled, or literally anyone else. I mean, if they're able to just capture these ships at will, why were super beings even necessary? As it seemed like at the beginning of this issue, Stormwatch 1 had kind of just been standing around, just sort of like monitoring the situation. It doesn't make any sense to me that, this has all happened if it were not for the fact that we see this issue try to tie into the events of Wildcats number 5. So it makes me wonder if this issue was kind of just thrown out there to tie into Wildcats, and this resulted in what had been the overarching Stormwatch narrative being set on the back burner for a minute so that all of these issues could line up for the crossover. Now, I could be completely wrong. I have no way of verifying any of this. It's just a theory I have, just an opinion, if you will. And your opinion may be completely different. You might think that this was the plan from the start and that, obviously a UN peacekeeping team would be, pulled around the world to do different things. But still, it seems to me that, they probably would have prioritized WarGuard. But again, just opinions. And your opinions may be different, and that's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinion. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.